Welcome to the Web Design Business Podcast with your host, Josh Hall, helping you build a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hello, friends. Welcome into episode 205, where I am stoked to bring to you in this episode one of my students and somebody who has had an amazing first phase of his journey into web design. This is Nick Monahan, whose name might sound a little bit familiar if you've been listening to the podcast a lot recently. I had Nick back on 187, where I actually took a clip from a coaching call we had in my coaching community, and Nick talked about how he landed his first 10K client. I said in that episode I wanted to bring him back officially on the podcast to specifically talk about how he got to six figures in his business. And as you'll find out, in actually just over a year. I thought it was about a year and a half, but come to find out it was just over a year he got to six figures. However, it was messy. And Nick is very open in this interview about how he got to six figures and the things he did right, but also the things he did not so right. So my goal for you in this episode is to hear Nick's experience with the fact that, yes, you can get your business to six figures, i.e. $100,000 pretty quick, as fast as you want to. But my goal for you is to do it in a way that's not so messy. And the cool thing about what I've experienced with Nick is, yes, the first year was messy, although he learned so much. The second year, as you'll find out, is going so much better for him. And I'm so privileged to be able to coach Nick, and with my courses have been able to kind of help him reel in his systems. And it's just, I mean, this is why I do what I do, this situation that you're about to hear. So I'm so excited to bring Nick on. And again, if you have aspirations of getting your web design business to six figures, you want to do it quickly, especially for those of you who have mortgages and bills and a lot more pressure, you can do it. Let's talk about how to do it not so messy. And before we dive in and before you hear from Nick, as you'll hear in this episode, Nick actually first went through my course bundle. So if you don't know, I have all of my web design courses, 9 web design courses in a bundled option that is discounted. So if you've been a student, you can always upgrade to the bundle. Or if you are just interested in getting the whole shebang, you're welcome to go through my bundle. There'll be a link for that on the show notes for this episode at joshhall.co/205. If you want to be the next Nick, but want to do it not so messy, join my course bundle. I'll walk you through everything that you need to know with growing your web design business. And for now, here's Nick. Let's talk about how he got six figures fast, but it wasn't so pretty, in order to help you make it not so messy. Nick, welcome officially to the podcast, man. I actually posted part of one of our coaching chats from the Web Design Club, because I've been able to coach you in there back in 187. But I'm so excited that you agreed to come on officially to hear about your story about taking your business to six figures in around 18 months or so. So Nick, welcome officially, man.
Thank you so much, man. It's so funny. I started out as a huge fan of yours and joined the club, and it's been just an awesome experience so far.
Well, you are like a shining star student as far as your work ethic and how you've implemented. And in our little coaching interview, if anyone wants to go back and listen to that, it was a short episode 187. You kind of said you're comfortable with talking, and you could, what did you say? You could talk the ears off a
statue.
A statue. There it is. Yeah. So yeah, but it's really cool. Like, it's cool to see that so many different personalities excel in web design, and what I've seen you do is excel at what you're good at, which is really hard to teach, because some people just cannot get out of their own way. But I feel like the biggest strides I've seen you implement is kind of getting out of your own way and doing what you're good at. So I'm so excited to just hear, like, from your perspective, what you've done to get to this milestone. I mean, dude, six figures, congrats. That's so cool. You're a young business owner. You've got a family now. You've got a wife. We got to talk about the most important thing. Yes, you had a baby, but the most important thing is your team won the Stanley Cup recently, being out in Colorado. So congrats for your Avs winning that cup, man. And you are a photographer for them. That might be a great place to start. Like, you told me you were an NHL photographer, and then you started doing web design on the side. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so my story is actually pretty wild. The journey, it's a longer one, but a long story short, I started out of college. I was a special ed paraprofessional. So I worked with behavioral disorder students. And when I was there, the funniest story was we had lunchroom. You had to be a supervisor of some sort of club in the lunchroom. And so my best friend was also my co-teacher. So I got to stay in the same class, and it was photography club. So instead of like that, my little trick to get the whole hour, it was I did photography club and wound up being the only student that went pro in photography out of that club. And I was the teacher. But the funny thing there was I was a freelance photographer. I was traveling the country, photographing weddings, engagements, proposals, things like that. And I knew I was going to get married. I had met my girlfriend then, who's now my wife. And I was like, I should probably get more of a stable job. So I wound up getting hired at an agency in town here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I was like, I think I could do this on my own. And at the same time, I still had the passion for photography. And so I started out with Colorado State University photographing, and then the Colorado Eagles, which is the American Hockey League team, the minor league affiliate. Did well there for a year. And then what brings the whole story full circle was they brought me on to photograph in the NHL after they saw my work with the Eagles. So that and those two storylines kind of walked side by side together. So it was really cool.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's really cool. Cause I'm always curious, like, how do you get a job photography, doing photography for the NHL? That's really cool. It makes sense how that progression works. Now I have to know, you just said you might want a more stable job. You just started a web design agency, which is the opposite of stability in the early days, typically. So what made you decide to get into web design and really think about making this like a legit business?
Yeah, it's crazy. I blame my dad. He was insurance. He owned his own insurance agency. My grandfather owned his own insurance agency before that. So I kind of broke the chain with insurance, but you got some entrepreneurial blood in the bloodline.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is, man, I know if I could do something that I feel like I could do it better or best, I want to forge forward and do it. And so the agency I was with, they're fine. They're fantastic, but I knew that I wanted to do it better, and just wanted to have something that was my own that I can control and I can lead. So yeah, it's so funny. I remember coming home hat in hand, my box of stuff, tell my wife, hey, we're going full into this. And she's like, are you kidding me? And this was all within our first 6 months of marriage. I got married and then started my own business. And so it's funny. I worked for a year in stability at an agency, wanted to do it my own, and then off we went.
And so how, like web design itself, how did that come into the picture? Was there a certain aspect of it that you were drawn to? Because I would assume, being an NHL photographer, that maybe you'll just do like a course on photography for sports or something like that. But what was it about web design that drew you into it? And how did you start doing websites and marketing and that kind of stuff?
All that. Yeah. So it's funny because remember how I said I got that job to get stability? That place there, they would take a lot of people off the streets. Like they didn't need any qualifications. And so that's the funniest part is at the time that they took me on without having any previous qualification. They're like, we'll teach you. And then I fell in love with the process, because the nice thing about building websites is you could be creative and you could also like itch that bug of structure and growth and having a challenging mindset. And so that was like my two favorite things, like photography, like artwork, taking pictures. And so I also take pictures of local clients because I still get to do that, but it also challenged me to be a creative and building websites that people love and allow their businesses to grow. So it was just kind of the marriage of creativity and having structure and enjoying a process.
That's a good point. And there's a lot of things that translate to web design that you wouldn't think would translate. Like coming from a musician background, I learned early on, like so much of what I learned as a musician and then my old jobs translated to web design much better than like a formal degree would have. And for photography, that's a huge one, because you learn how to take something and make it look awesome, or you learn how to put best practices in place, but you got to learn on the fly. You got to adapt all the things that you have to do in web design as a business owner. So this agency that hired you, you worked with them for a little while. Were they like just a website agency type business, or did they do digital marketing and other aspects of web design?
Yeah, they did digital marketing. So they did the whole gamut, but I was a project manager. So I would kind of make sure all the websites were flowing well when they built. And I did helped out with all 5, but I fell in love with the website design journey and creation. So I knew that was a direction I really wanted to head towards.
Gotcha. And I think the reason I wanted to mention that and kind of hang on this for a minute is I think it's actually a really good kind of lesson and case study, because for anyone right now who's listening who might be working for an agency, that doesn't mean that that's going to be where you're going to be forever. Like, I think it's actually really valuable to work for agencies and see how they do things. You can take the good and the bad and make it your own. And I know as a white label designer, I got to work with a couple of different agencies and see their process. And I was never on payroll. I never worked in their office, but I did get experienced, and I got exposed to like Basecamp. And that's when I found out about Divi. And that's when I learned a lot of these tools. And then I found out that there was a process for these websites that was much better than my ad hoc process at the time. And then that kind of helped me build my own business. So is it fair to say, Nick, that like your year or so in that agency helped at least give you a foundation of how to do things, and then helped maybe kind of empower you to go out on your own?
Yes, that's exactly it. And then Josh, you mentioned something too that literally was an entire game changer for me as a web developer, is having growth mindset. Right. Instead of this fixed, like, this is my way or the highway, like I want to do it. It's like you're working with other agencies and you pick up things that work and maybe don't work for you and your personality or your team. And so that was a huge thing for me, is when I was with that first agency, I figured out what worked and what didn't work. And then growing with other agencies that I know in town and helping out white labeling, I figure out their processes. And if there's something that I like, I'm like, boom, give me that. I need that.
That's a great point. Yeah. Growth. And then also, what I found is like adaptability is so much more important than anything, because there is no right or wrong way to build professional websites and help grow web presence. There's so many different ways you could do it. When I white labeled for some agencies, I learned some things that they did much better than I did, but then I actually had some tricks up my sleeves that they were like, oh, we never think about doing it that way. And then they kind of, took from me and I took from them in some way. So it's a valuable point, I think, when it comes to fast tracking your journey. I'm going to share what worked for me and what I've learned and what you and a lot of other awesome students are implementing real world right now. But my web design process isn't the right web design process. It's my process, and it can always adapt and change. So I'm glad that you had that mindset. I think that helped you early on, because the reality is it's right about 1.5 years that you went to 6 figures, right? With your business. Yeah.
We were about 14, 15 months when we hit it.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. That's just over a year then, not even 1.5 years.
That's a lot of hustle.
A lot of hustle. And so you're newly married. You decided to go full time. I know you weren't pregnant at that point yet. I remember when you messaged me in the Web Design Club and you're like, got a surprise. I was like, oh man, I think I even told you now is when you're really gonna start making money. Because once that kid comes along, there's something about providing for somebody like your wife where, it forces you to mature up a little bit. But once you have a baby, it's on. You're like, there's something that snaps in your business mindset that it gets stuff done. So when you officially went full time, did you do it like as a side hustle while you were working in the agency, or how, like, take me back to the beginning of Monahan Media. What did that look like?
Yeah, well, it looked like a lot of scary nights. I always laughed that my ceiling was my most viewed object in my house because I'd be up at night just looking at it. But
that's funny.
Yeah, it started off, we hit the ground running. It was a clean break. So I had worked at this one agency for a year. I worked with my buddy's agency for 1 month because I was like, I know I can do it. I know I have what it takes. But like you said, I don't know what I don't know, right? Like, what are the things, the tangibles that I need to run an agency? So I worked it with one of my friends for a month, and I decided I can do this. I know I can, and it's scary, and I'm newly married and all that, but I want to do it. So I took a picture my first day at my little hokey desk that is just like, barely put together with my laptop on there. And I said, this is my vision. This is my dream. I know I can do it. And so we just went. And so I did what I knew how to do in photography, is just started posting on Instagram, Facebook, used my network and said, hey guys, I am a web developer now. This is my agency and this is where we're going. And it's crazy because I truly believe in like caring for others, in all aspects. And when you do that, the return is really cool. So people started reaching out like crazy in the first couple of months, but here's what happened after those first like 3 or 4 months. And you mentioned this all the time. People stopped reaching out. Like there's that excitement the first couple of months where all your friends are excited for you. And then you hit a wall and you're freaking out. You're like talking to your wife. You're like, oh, honey, I can't believe I did this. But we forged through, kept communicating, joined networking groups, and just never stopped networking, communicating, and building that momentum that we talked about in episode 187.
Yeah, that's a great point. For whatever reason, there's just always a dip. And I talked with, I had Amy Porterfield on the podcast recently, who has been an online entrepreneur. She's one of the top online entrepreneurs in the world. And she's been in this industry for well over a decade. And she said the same thing. And everyone she knows has been through the same thing. It's like you get this momentum, and it may be because like you're so personally excited. And then inevitably there's just this dip, and hopefully it doesn't last too long. But the thing that I like what you did is you didn't just sit in the corner and cry or stare at the ceiling nonstop. You actually did something. So you get to that dip. You mentioned you joined some networking groups. You did some other things. What was it that got you? Could you point to like 1 or 2 things that really helped you get through that little dip after 3 or 4 months? Because I would imagine you got some projects, you got some money in the bank. You see like, this is a good, this could work. But then suddenly the money dries up when your leads dry up. So yeah, what were the specific things you did that helped get you past that early dip when you went through that?
Yeah, the first thing was I decided that for 2 days or 3 days of the week, I was going to set up lunch dates, coffee dates, meet with people. And the big thing was I knew I was meeting people that probably had no interest in my business, right? They're like, they're either a part of a national chain or they have other, they're working with someone else. But I started hitting the streets, so to speak, started talking to people because, if you make that good connection with someone, you have a great cup of coffee with someone, they may say, I don't need you right now. But my friend, I was literally just talking about who needs a digital marketer or needs a web developer or what have you. And then that network like kind of goes. So that's number one. I had a buddy challenge me to have a cup of coffee with someone different every week, every day of the week.
Oh, that's
Obviously,
cool.
I didn't do all 5 days, but that was a great challenge. And then the other thing was joining a chamber of commerce. That was enormous. It really opened up doors. As you could probably tell, I'm a very relational guy. So it really opened up the doors. And I guess I know you said 1 or 2, 3, but the third one was I started hiring people because I started to realize my max capacity was met and then I'd lose sales, right? Like if I was in the weeds, if I made a ton of sales, if I sold a bunch of websites and then I was building them, I didn't have time to go out and network. So I started hiring people, hiring my friends, and then I would go out and network some more. So those are my top 3 things that I would say is have a cup of Joe and a jaw wag with someone, go out and join a local networking like Chamber of Commerce or BNI, and then understand what your limitations are, understand what your capability reaches are, and then find someone who's really good at that skill set, hire them, and continue on with yours.
It's an avalanche of gold that you just put out there, Nick. I'm going to try to use as many avalanche puns as I can through this conversation. The thing that's so important that you mentioned there that I got is just the mindset, particularly of networking, because most people, if they go to a group, they're like, okay, I got to try to get these people to be my clients. But that is the complete wrong mindset. You will get such better success when you go to a networking group or a chamber of commerce, and it takes all the pressure off when you just be you and share what you know and share what you do with no pressure to the other people there, whether it's a one-on-one meeting or a small group or a group of 30 people in a networking group or a chamber of commerce meeting. What you said is exactly the path that I took. And then I've seen so many web designers who do networking, who excel at it, because it's not the people you meet that necessarily will be your clients. Sometimes they will, often that will happen, but it's who they know. And you've talked about this. We've talked about this before in the Web Design Club. If if you can make awesome websites, but you just sit behind your computer and no one knows about it, you're not going to be in business very long, because people are not going to magically refer you. They don't know you. They don't know what you do. And it doesn't mean that you need to be this like bombastic, like social media influencer personality. Like, you are much more extroverted. I get that that's not the case for everybody, but you can still share what you do and get out there. Even if you're low key and don't want to technically talk as much, you can still get out there. You have to, if you're going to run your business, you've got to be the salesperson either way. But like you said, those relationship type of principles, I'm so glad you applied that early on, because that's definitely, it sounds like what helped you get past that low point. And then, like you mentioned, you got to a point where suddenly you went from no work to like slammed. I think I remember you saying like, now I don't even know what to do. I've got so much work. And I do want to get into how you started hiring. Before we do though, I am kind of curious. Early on, did you go through any formal courses or training in the first few months? I mean, you learned a lot from the agency, or did you pretty much just wing it? And is that how you kind of came up with your web design services in the first phase of building your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it was a culmination of things. So it was what I knew from my previous agency. And then I had other friends that were in the industry that I was constantly bending their ears. I was constantly asking, hey, what's your guys' process? What do you guys do? What does this look like? And then trial and error. I laugh. I can't. Oh, it's right here. My business was built on these, what are they called? The yellow notebooks or whatever.
Yeah, beautiful.
I have meetings with myself every Friday and just literally write down things that worked and didn't work that week. And then the best, I'll tell you, and this is going to be my shameless plug for your courses, because I'll tell you, I'll never forget the day I was driving to play golf on the highway on I-25 headed north, and I was frustrated. I felt like I was beating my head against the wall, and I was listening to a podcast, and you were on it, and you were a guest on that podcast. And I heard just the way you spoke about web development, web design, and I heard just your systems and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, like this guy, I need to listen to this guy. Like he knows what he's talking about. And I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. And so I was listening to your podcast, listen. And then you had given a deal on, I think it was episode 130 something, 137. I can't remember, 120, in and around there. And I was like, dude, I've got to sign up for your courses. And I will tell you, and this is not a word of a lie, anybody who's listening, please, if you are on the fence about joining his courses and becoming a student, do it. I promise, because it was literally an entire game changer for our agency, and it was a game changer for me as a business person. I learned the ins and outs, and you talked in a way that was very, very comprehensible. Like, it was very easy to understand. And it is funny because I'm like this. I'm, as you can probably tell, I speak 1,000 words a minute. I put you on 2x and I hammer out all the notes so I could like comprehend it. But
nice.
Your courses were what really sent us to the next level to understand, kind of how we can do well.
Oh, Nick, that's so awesome to hear, man. I mean, you just gave me chills thinking about, you're like you're my ICA, my ideal customer avatar. You are exactly. And I think it sounds like my resources hit you and got to you right when they're supposed to get to somebody. And that's when you kind of know quite a bit about web design. You're fumbling into it. You've got your own processes, but things are just messy. And you just need to reel some things in. You need to take it to the next level. So I'm so glad that you got exposed to my stuff when you did. And what an honor to be able to help you at that point. And now, a year and a half later, where you are now, which I know we're going to get into. But man, that's so cool to hear, dude. Do you remember what podcasts were you listening to that you were exposed to my interview?
Yeah, it was Wes McDowell's, the
profitable podcast.
Website.
Yeah, profitable website. I know he stopped his podcast. He's just doing YouTube now. But that's happened with a lot of people. A lot of people are dropping their podcasts. I'm sure as heck not. I'm like ramping this baby up. So that's cool, man. That's so cool to hear. And so when was that? Was that like a few months into the business that you went through my courses, or was that before you actually started?
It was a few months in. It was about this time last year, actually.
Okay.
I think it was like Dude, I don't know if you remember, I bought a course for you and I was like, oh, I might do the cPanel one and just check it out. And then like, oh my gosh, I forgot what was my first course I bought. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is gold. I just wound up doing that, the full
The bundle.
stack of, yeah. I mean, dude, I was like, what are we doing? Let's just get this whole thing.
Well, and it's really beneficial for you in that case because you wanted to learn design, cPanel, Divi, all the technical side of things, but then also the business side of things, which I think if I remember right, you went through the business stuff pretty quickly, especially since you already had a business at that point. You didn't have that much time to like hang on design stuff and take your time necessarily because you had a business. You had, I think, were you married at that time or maybe you were about to get married? So, and the next thing I was kind of curious about was, did you have like a fallback plan? I mean, you're still today doing photography for the Avalanche. I imagine you get compensated there, but is that like, that's probably not a full-time income, I would imagine. Like what was your fallback plan there? Or did you have any sort of fallback plan?
Dude, we burnt the ships, bro. We had no fallback plan. But yeah, I was working with the Avs photographing, but obviously that's not a crazy amount of money. It's super part-time, more of a passion project, I suppose. And I would still do photography here and there, but dude, we had no backup plan, and call it like dumb ignorance or what. I was just like, I know this is going to work. So it is scary, but we full sent that bad boy and we were flipping fried sitting on the side, ready to go.
Wow. The best entrepreneurs I know don't have a backup plan. So I asked that question tongue in cheek because the people who burn the bridges and that is the only option, you figure it out. The good news is you're in an industry and you got into an industry that is booming. So I would say like for people who are considering quitting a job, and obviously it's good to have some savings just for those learning periods. In the beginning, you are going to fumble around. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have some good months, some bad months. So if you can have 3 to 6 months of savings, awesome. But you can still make it work, especially early. You might have to adjust your lifestyle a little bit, but by golly, the lessons you'll learn and the person you'll become when you do that, it makes everything so much better. And this is actually a really important point. It feels like to me that you're used to doing stuff that can be a little hard. I've found the hardest things in life are the best and they're the most rewarding. I mean, you've gone through it. You said you hustled in the beginning. Hopefully you're able to kind of hustle a little less now, 1.5 years after all that. But those tough times kind of make it, the success is worth it, right? Like it puts a new spin and a new light when you get that $10,000 project and you've got some money in the bank. That's certainly what I've learned when it comes to hustling in those hard times.
Yeah, that juice is a lot sweeter after you've been hustling and grinding a little bit. It was scary. I always, my wife, she is amazing. She always tells me, because I love to tell people the hot mountaintop moments. I love that, as you can probably tell. But there are some tough times. Like it is definitely like, it's stressful. Like it is, your back's against the wall. I love Frank Sinatra, so I listen to My Way whenever my back's against the wall. And I'm like, I can do it. But yeah, it's as an entrepreneur and someone who's forging the way, I just think of your why has to be crazy, crazy strong for what you're doing. And like, if your why is not like quite there, it'll be tough and you'll question a lot. So that was a big thing for me, is like, I wanted a better life for my son. So I'm like, there's no way that this is going to fail because I won't let it. It won't happen.
But your why, before you found out you guys were pregnant, when did the downtime come? Like that drop, was that before you guys got pregnant?
Yeah, it was literally right before.
So what was your why before that? I'm kind of curious. Was it your wife, or was it for freedom? Was it uncapped earning potential? What was your biggest why before you guys found out you're pregnant?
Yeah, it was that financial freedom. Like growing up, like it's not that we were not poor, but like, dude, our backs are against the wall a few times. And like, oh my gosh, as a kid, that's nails. Like, you're just like, dude, like, I want to, I got Junior over here is living a good life. And like, it's not that we weren't, but like, we definitely had our struggles. And my why was like, I don't want to live like that. I want to be financially like secure and free, and want to build something that, like we knew we wanted to have kids down the way, but I wanted something that like was a cornerstone to our family to have that financial security. The other thing is, I don't know. You can see I played football at the University of Missouri. Did you know that I was a college football player?
I didn't. It doesn't surprise me though. You have a not a stocky build, but you look like you could take a hit. Yeah. Or give a hit.
That's right. Yeah. But even and then I was a walk-on. So I always had this like fighter mentality that I will overcome whatever's in my way. And that's what I would also suggest too. Like as entrepreneurs, like there's a ton that's going to be in your way. Don't let it slow you down. Keep fighting through. There's resources and lean on your other entrepreneur friends because holy cow. Sorry, my ADD is kicking in right now.
But no, I love that. There's so many important things you're hitting on. Yeah. Community and people who understand you, because for your family is going to want to help, but they don't know. They don't understand they don't understand what you're going through. I mean, even you had business owners in your family, like you listen to this show. I'm sure, you know, my family is not in the entrepreneurial world. So, you know, their advice, God bless them. I'm going to appreciate it, but it's not probably going to translate very well to the online world. You got to get around people who have the exact same struggles. And more importantly, the people who have been through it. So I'm so glad, you know, you came on to my podcast and my stuff at a time where sounds like it was probably pretty crucial. Like you're in that make or break kind of season. So, man, that's so cool, Nick. Now, one thing I was kind of curious about too, when you started, did you know your services or were you just all over the place? Were you doing like websites and social media? And obviously you're doing photography, which is really cool. I think that's a great ancillary service that can lead into websites. And of course, if you work with a local client, you could take pictures and that could be a part of your package. Like what did your suite of services look like when you started?
Dude, all things to all people in the first months, and it was a gong show.
You're cutting grass and delivering mail, whatever.
Walking the dog, painting the fence, build your website, whatever you need, dude. Yes, that's something that, you know, Josh, I'm so glad you brought that up because when you're first starting out, I always laugh because I know you laugh too, is the drum lessons on your first card.
Yeah, my business card.
That was me too. I was like, dude, video, got it. I'll do that for you. And you start to realize that like, hey, if you can make it work, good for you. But it is really difficult to do all things to all people and you're like juggling these balls and you're just like, which one's going to drop first doing all those things?
You can't be successful. You literally cannot be successful if you do everything for everybody. It's such an important point. I do think there's a lot of room in the beginning for experimentation and seeing what you're good at, seeing what you like. I didn't know that I was actually going to be pretty good with SEO. I thought that was never something I was ever going to touch. And then come to find out after years of building sites and giving advice on how to do better SEO, when I launched my brand, I was like, wow, actually, I know a lot about this. I actually like quite a bit about this, even though I'm not an SEO guy. But I say that to say I never would have guessed I was going to be good at that or have interest in that. Now, I thought I was going to be doing a lot more photography, similar to you, which is kind of funny. I don't know if you know, Nick, when I started, I did photography very similarly. I did a lot of photography for my clients, but I was never a great photographer. You're probably way better than I was. So I found myself offering photography as like a big secondary service to web design. And it did lead to a lot of opportunities. But I remember going to businesses in Columbus and having like 20 people come in and do their staff shots. And I never really got the lighting real great. Like some of my sites with my photography turned out pretty cool. If anyone wants to check one out, you can go to terriersteel.com. I did photography for them. That actually turned out pretty sweet to like photograph steel workers and stuff. It was easy to take pictures of, but I say that to say I was doing like staff shots and they just were not great. And then I realized I'm spending over half a day at least doing like these pictures of 20 people and I'm getting paid like $300 and it's just not, it's not working. I'm taking away from my best services. So that's kind of how I learned that I'm doing way too much. I'm doing things that I can do it, but I'm not really good at it. So like to turn it over to you, Nick, what were you doing that you realized I need to stop this. I need to stop this to be more profitable and to focus on the good stuff. Like what were you doing that was just not in your wheelhouse?
Yeah, that is actually, oh man, such a good testament, because yes, at the first you're going to be wide open, and you're right. Because I hear a lot of people, they're like, you need to focus, or you need to niche down. Is, well, yes, I agree. One day, if that works for you, do that, but figure out before you just go ahead and niche everything. And
Right.
so to answer your question, I was doing social media management, video, logo building. Let's see, I was doing email marketing, and all that, like all these different, different marketing like skills. And I realized like we weren't doing good. We were sucking. Like we were not winning championships doing that. Right. And so, in my mind, I do that Friday meeting with myself, but I also do quarterly where we just look at everything. And we're actually in a season right now where we're slimming down. We're trying to trim all the fat because we're scaling. And the big thing that I'm finding when you scale, and hopefully this helps somebody listening, is you have to make your processes repeatable, or scaling is going to be just a gong show mess, right? So we are really just doing SEO and web development because that's what we're good at. That's where the butter's bred, and that's where we're really going to see success.
And are you doing photography at all still? Or
on the side? Yeah, a little bit more so for passion stuff. Like,
but it's not a part of your business. Like are you doing staff shots or anything like that for clients?
If it's local, and they're like, because here's the other thing is, I'm sure, if your website doesn't have good pictures, oh my gosh, people lose their mind. And I'm like, I can't make something out of nothing. So if they're local, I'll go out for an hour and take some shots and kind of keep it moving.
Well, it's kind of nice to have that as an add-on. Like maybe it's not a primary service and you don't advertise it on your website, but when the time comes, it is nice sometimes to be like, well, by the way, like we need pictures for your website. I am a photographer in a previous life, and on the side we could do this. And there's a $499 package or whatever it is for a certain set of photos, and we can add that in with the proposal, give it a discount since you're doing the website, and boom, you can have a nice little addition to the project. That's what I learned when I started refining my services, is the things I could do that I didn't want to do all the time, I would just bring up if it was a good fit. So that's probably a good rule of thumb and a good lesson for folks who do have the ability to, maybe they do video, or maybe they do copywriting, or what. Well, copywriting should probably be a main service in most all web design, but you know what I mean? Like you could do some of those things occasionally, but you said it, you get to the point where when it's not just you and you're ready to scale a little bit, whatever that looks like, you have got to make it repeatable. Well said, Nick. You learned that early on because you dove like a lot of things. I think you probably do. You dive headfirst into the deep end. And so you were scaling. It was basically like a mess because you went through this drop. Like I'm visualizing your journey, all this momentum, you went through this drop, you just kept at it. You built up momentum. You got out of your comfort zone. You did those meetings. Your mindset was there. You start getting a ton of clients, and then you scale. And then it just turns into the shit show of like trying to figure out what to do with your team and stuff. So like this is probably a whole nother episode, but what did you learn the hard way about scaling?
Man, yeah, how much time you got, right? I think the hard way was I learned, if you're going to scale, train your team. Even if you have a smidge of a system, train them up on it. It's my own fault of just learning. I put people in positions that it wasn't their strength, but I just needed it. And then I was like, here, you could probably do this. This is the rundown, how you kind of do it. Just go ahead. And then they come back, and to no fault of theirs, it's not the product that you need. And then you're like, you spend the time that you should be like grinding, doing something else, fixing the mess that you kind of made. And again, it was to no fault of the people. You just didn't prepare your team well. So
you got to give them clear deliverables, clear action items, like almost like a clear job description and SOPs, like how to do something.
Yeah. And the thing, Josh, all these things you've said before, but you've said it once. It's a lot. Scaling is a lot of work up front. Yes. It's a grind. You're changing your business model to fit other people, and you have to communicate well. And so it's a lot of work up front, setting up those systems, training properly. But on the back, when you're on that back nine, baby, things are smooth. But at the front, it's a lot of work. And the other thing you had also mentioned a while back, goodness gracious, maybe this time last year, was that it's so scary to turn over your business to someone else or even a piece of your business to someone else. But it's necessary if you want to grow. If you want to be a solopreneur, hey, go ahead. That's awesome. And there's a billion people that are amazing at that. Keep running that route, baby. But if you're looking to grow and scale, it's scary. But the first time you do it, you get addicted to it, baby.
It's true. It's true. And we can shout out to Sandy, who through the Web Design Club, because she's in the process. I got to get her on because she's learning so much about scaling and she's loving it. But not that long ago, she was like, I don't want to scale. I want to do everything myself. I like being a solopreneur. But she got so slammed. There's no other choice. Even with raising rates, it's like at some point you want to free up some time to actually live your life and enjoy this if it's becoming too much. So the cool thing is scaling doesn't have to be this like huge thing where you have payroll and you have a downtown office and overhead. Like you can scale very manageably, one step at a time. But I do think you're right, Nick. The biggest hurdle that I've seen and then that I personally went through was that mentality where it's like, this is me. Like I design the websites, people work with me. And as soon as you put a process in place, it becomes a business. And then you can still, the cool thing is you can still scale in a way. And I don't know exactly how you're scaling at this point, but you can still lay out the design in the early days and then have somebody fill in the rest of the content and build out the rest of the pages. So your DNA is still in the design, but yeah, you're right. It gets addicting. And then suddenly it's like, well, I don't even want to lay out the homepage anymore. I'm going to let them do that. Eventually Jonathan, who was my lead designer, eventually I just got to the point where I did the initial brief with the client. Sometimes he'd be on a call with us. I would do the strategy and help with the messaging and positioning, but then design, it was all him and it was awesome. And then you get to the point where, like I said, you're on that back nine, and then suddenly you do have the time to invest in growing the business, working on your systems, working on your offers, taking some time off, going to a movie on a Tuesday or going golfing if that's your thing, whatever it is. Is that kind of where you're at right now? Do you feel like you're maybe on the back nine in some way? I mean, I know you're early in the business still, but.
Yeah, but I knew I wanted to scale right away. Well, not right away, but after just getting sick of doing everything on my own, I knew I wanted to scale. Yeah, I would say definitely at that spot. There's two things too. The one other thing is my wife hit me with this one time is she said, Nick, if you're going to scale and you're going to have team members, they have to fail every once in a while too. It's part of the growth. And because something may happen and I'm like, dude, like this is not working. I'm like, fretting out. And my wife's like, it's working. You're everything. But sometimes, like they have to learn too, right? They're on their educational journey as well. And then the other thing that I wanted to give another shout out because you know me, most of my team is actually part of the your referral network. The club. Yeah. Shannon and Michelle. Shannon's helps build a bunch of websites for me, and Michelle is a beast SEO.
And look, quite honestly, that is why it's so important to get in a community of other designers who know the stuff and they're in the same room. Even if they have a lot to learn, it's way different. And whether it's my Web Design Club or a Facebook group or other resources, whatever it is, get into a web design community. Free, premium, there's tons of options, but get into a web design community because you will meet people who you can partner up with and dish out. And like you said, I think early on, it sounds like you trained some friends. It's way harder to train somebody who knows nothing about web design and get them in the door. Whereas if you find somebody who's even a junior, but knows WordPress, knows Divi, whatever tools you're using, and at least can do a little bit and learn pretty quick, that's where the gold is. That's where the unicorns are.
Yeah, that's where the peanut butter meets the jelly, man. That's the best spot right there.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you did that. Like you it seems like that's when your scaling efforts kind of started getting to another level when you got to work with some folks who learned pretty quickly and implemented, and boom, you're at a whole new level. Now, what about your pricing? Did you pretty quickly up your pricing? And then once you started scaling well, is that when you really started adjusting your pricing and raising your rates and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. You say it wherever you're at right now. Anybody who's listening to this, wherever you're at, up your prices right now, 10%, 15%. Because the biggest thing is I started to realize our value that we had when I started bringing on minds that were, I'll be honest, smarter than me. Like I'm good, but hey, my team is 10 times better at each their position than I am at all of their position. Right. And so I started to realize that, and with that, the growing that value, we did start to raise our rates. Hey, our minimum, we don't sniff anything under 3,500 now because I got a team to feed, right? And then also our value, just we're up and coming. That doesn't mean if you're below that, you're bad or wrong, but that's where we're at. And oh man, my ADD is kicking. But the other thing is understanding where you're at in your journey versus other people, right? So like our value, I feel like is pretty high because we've been around it. I've got a lot of people who understand what they're doing. And that's why we're able to raise our rates. But I was always comparing myself to other agencies in town. I'm like, man, I'm not them. I'm not them. It's like, yeah, you're right. You're not them, but you will be one day. So,
our last episode, when I shared our little coaching convo on 187, you talked about the fact that you were just in a little like think tank group with an agency owner who was about like at a different level than you, but $10,000 project for them was like not even in their ballpark, but for you, suddenly like you're able to take that on. So for him, 10,000 was nothing. For you, that's an awesome project in this point right now. And likewise, there may be a junior or like a freelance web designer who's just starting out, who $1,000 for a project might seem like the best thing in the world. I remember that very well. And maybe you're at a point where, I don't know if you've done this, you could start passing those on to like, little Nick, who is a few years younger, who's out of high school, wants to make some money on the side. $1,000 for the summer to build a website over a couple of months might be incredible. And now it's your opportunity to start feeding those smaller fish. We got to get back on the avalanche analogies here, but you know what I mean? Like, snow piles. Yeah. Throw those snowballs. So you know what I mean? Like there's definitely a point where you're getting the opportunities, and then suddenly you can start feeding opportunities, but you're still going to get those opportunities from bigger agencies as long as you are friends with them. And as long as you're just cool. Like I love your example. We don't have to rehash the whole thing because that's what we talked about in 187, but you basically were just talking about what you do and how you refine your services. And that guy heard you, liked you, and thought Nick and his agency could take on this $10,000 project. How did that go, by the way? We're kind of in the post-mortem of that, I think. How did that 10K project go?
Yeah. So it's actually so funny you say that. It got delayed a month and I was fretting like crazy. I was on Josh's show. We talked about it, but sure enough, everything kind of went moving and it is going, oh my gosh, it's going so awesome. We just had our initial mock-up yesterday. She loved it.
Awesome.
Side note, I didn't even pitch it. My marketing coordinator pitched it and she crushed it. And then the client loved it. And dude, I'll always say this to the day, those clients that have bigger budgets are the best to work with because they understand the value, they understand the process and all that. So it's been going really well and I'm super excited.
Now with your scaling efforts, like I imagine these are all subcontractors, 1099, like no one's officially on the payroll, it sounds like. But how are you, a couple questions on that. How are you factoring in financially? Like you mentioned you raise your rates. Have you found there to be like a sweet spot of like the amount of money that you're going to take from a project versus what you're paying your team? I mean, is it basically like 50-50 at this point, or is there any sort of like general range of percentages between like what you're taking personally and your efforts in the project and business versus what you're paying?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do is around 35% for me and the agency. Okay. And then for the contractor, around 35-40%. And then 20% I always stock away for taxes. And then the rest is for just like our marketing coordinator. So that's a big thing too, is understand what products and what price points give you the best return, and it takes some time sitting down, crunching the numbers. I actually have a bookkeeper who helps me with that. Beautiful. But find out what is your best sweet spot. That was ours, is those percentages, and everyone is happy and off you go. So can you hit me with those numbers again? So it was like, let's say like what, maybe 35 for you, 35 for lead designer team. That would put us at 70, maybe 20 for taxes. Good rule of thumb, unfortunately. And then that would leave it. That's us at 90. So then we'd have like 10% for
marketing or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, whoever your project manager. If you have a project manager, we have one. We call our marketing coordinator. Her name's Megan, and so then that'll go kind of for her salary.
Gotcha. And that's another important thing to remember too. Is yes, you will be sharing profits, and that's another big hang up that I've seen most people who scale have to overcome. Is like, well, I'm used to taking home $5,000 because I do everything, but it might take 4 months to get that $5,000 project done if you're doing it all yourself and doing 20 other projects. Whereas, yes, if you share even half of that with a designer, you're making 2,000 or 2,500, but then you're able to take on way more of those projects. And as you guys are doing, Nick, you build your recurring income with hosting and maintenance, which is key. So hopefully that's kind of what you've seen working out as far as the percentages and, what you're taking home.
Yeah. And it really allows me to play to my strengths, right? Like my team, my web designers are 1,000 times better at building websites than I am. But like I said, I could talk the ears off a statue. I could connect with anybody. My strength is in sales. So going out, meeting people. So if I'm getting bogged with this, sure that money it's nice to have, but my time's best well spent. There she is.
There you go.
Out and about and networking. So it really allows in hockey terms, the goalie's good at stopping the puck, right? The forwards are good at scoring. Why would you put a forward at goalie? He's not going to be good at that. So same kind of thing.
That's a great point. It's so important early on too, to try to realize and be self-aware about what you're good at. Again, you can go through some experimentation, but you'll learn pretty quickly what you're good at and what you like doing. And recently, I don't know if you heard the interview I did with Jenny Blake, who is back on 195, but something that she talked about in that episode is something that I'm implementing right now for myself as I'm delegating more and more, and that I would recommend everybody do. And that is to have a flow and friction list. Like, what are the things you're doing day to day over the span of a week or two that light you up and make you feel good and put you in that flow state? What are the things you're doing that gives you friction? And you're like, I hate doing this. And there's always going to be some things that you just have to get through in your business. But if the majority of your time is doing stuff you don't like, it's not going to end well. And it'll burn you out pretty quick. So for you, Nick, you found that out pretty quickly. I think you were self-aware about you're a people person. And the reality is, it's not that those jobs are better than designing websites or coding. It's just that if you are coding, if Nick is designing and tweaking CSS and troubleshooting, who's going to do the sales? You are the best person in your business for the sales and getting out there. So that is your most important task. That's such a great lesson, man. I'm so glad you've implemented that fairly early on, it sounds like.
Yeah, thanks. And I wanted to touch on that point, burnout, because it is a very, very, very real thing. And I've actually, even though, like I said, I talk mountaintop experiences, I experienced bad burnout twice so far, right? And in fact, last week, I took the whole week off in the mountains. Is incredible. It really allowed me to take a step back. But I had to learn, you have to listen to your body. You have to listen to your mind and listen to, and you say it best, there's going to be seasons where you have to forge through, right? There's going to be seasons, but please let that be a season or your business will be a season, right?
Well said.
Right? You have to figure out, listen to your body. You had a episode, and I can't remember who it was with, but she was saying it was really difficult for her to kind of allow herself to take Friday off, because her whole life she's been working all through Friday. And you have to, if you're tired, and obviously if the situation allows, and you're tired, take a break, dude. You've got to. That's so important.
It is a very hard thing to do. Yeah, I forget who said that. I think a lot of guests have probably mentioned that in a roundabout way, because it's really common, especially if you do come from the corporate world, or I came from the blue collar world, where if I showed up at 7:02 in the morning, I was getting chewed out because dudes were like, you lazy bum, what are you doing here after 7? I get here at 10 till. And the thought of not working on an entire Friday, or even taking half a day a Monday, it's weird. It does take some getting used to, but you're right. You got to listen to your body. There is a point where I think some people could take advantage of that and become a little too lackadaisical, but I think most entrepreneurs are not. That's not the case. The much bigger issue is to stop working than to get to work. So it is such a great point, especially when you're early on. You're going to have to hustle a little bit early on, but like you said, Nick, it's seasonal. you're going to have those times, but it's also seasonal by design. So for example, when you scaled, I would imagine like if you're going to spend 2 weeks documenting your processes, scaling a little bit, teaching, getting out there and trying to keep sales going, hopefully the next 2 weeks, you kind of intentionally cut down on the meetings. Like that's a simple way to do that. That way you don't do like a month or two straight of working 90 hours a week. And the other thing you could do is like, you could take 1 week, and I'm, talking to you, Nick, but anyone, especially when it comes to building a business and scaling, is you could take 1 week and have a lot more calls than usual and do your systems, do your processes, everything. The next week, make sure there's like 1 or 2 days in your calendar that are blocked off. And those are free days. If you want to work, cool. If you're feeling good, awesome. But if you need to just step back, I mean, there's so much power in just like 1 day, like having that off. There's so much power in that. So all that to say, you can do seasonal work by design, but you got to design it. You have to set your schedule.
Yeah, even cars, if you're flooring it all day long, will run out of gas eventually. That is exactly it. And the other thing too, this hit me. I was talking to my mother-in-law one time where I was like, these people, they just keep knocking down my doors and they keep calling and texting and emailing. And like, you know why? Because I let them, right? Like I didn't communicate boundaries in that with clients. Like, and almost 90% of your, and if they don't respect your boundaries, maybe they're not the client for you, but you have to set the boundaries of like, hey, these are my availability hours, or, hey, I'm going to be off this time. Don't talk to me. I will get back to you unless it's like the house is on fire. But that really comes to with that burnout of making sure that your clients understand the proper channels of communication so you don't burn out that way either.
Yeah, great point. And same thing be for team as well. Like you do have to get used to, okay, we're going to talk through Slack. I actually still primarily communicate through email with my editor and my VA, but we don't really talk that much, so it's not an issue. But the next evolution of my business will 100% be centralized team communication when needed. For you, it's way different. And I did that when I scaled my agency. It was all through Basecamp. Messenger would be more for just casual personal talk. But if we're going to talk business, we need to bring this over to Basecamp kind of thing. So yeah, that's really, really cool. So when did you officially start your business, Nick? When was the actual month that you started?
Yeah, December 2020.
That's right.
So right,
December,
right in the middle of Pandy.
So Pandy. We're literally talking. So we're 2.5 years officially. But I think you told me last year, you got to a point where you hit 6 figures with the business itself in just over about a year or so. But then that allowed you to scale a little bit. I'm kind of curious if somebody is listening to this and they're Nick from 3 years ago and they want to scale soon. Do you feel like there's a good number to get to business wise before you're ready to scale? Like, do you think you need to get to like 50,000 before you scale 6 figures? What are your thoughts on that? If I could throw that out to you.
Yeah, I'm actually really bad with numbers, but I'm very emotional. And so like for me, it was an emotional ticker where I was like, I can't emotionally handle this anymore. I'm like firing at all cylinders. And for me, it was that tipping point of like balls with clients were getting dropped. And I was like, dude, like I missed the deadline. Okay, 1 missed deadline, not the end of the world. Okay, but I missed the deadline here and here and here. And that's when for me, that was the sign of like, dude, you've got to figure this out or else you're just going to lose your clients and then you're going to be angry beaver all day long.
Well, especially as such a people person, I imagine it killed you to let somebody down.
Dude, it's the worst, dude. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But that was it. And we were making, I think at that point we were about 10,000 a month. And before I did that. So there is kind of that threshold, but yeah, for me, it was emotional.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was just,
no, you go.
We are cut from the same cloth because we talk in the same. Yeah, no, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. I'll have a question after that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I was going to say with that is that, oh goodness, now I can't remember. Eh? Oh well.
Well, we were my bad. I ruined it. We were talking about when to scale, whether it's on emotional level or whether you get to a certain place in business. But one thing that interesting you said there is you got to that like $10,000 a month mark. It doesn't mean that you need to wait a full year and see what you make to scale. Look at it monthly, like because the next month, if you scale a little bit, you might be able to double your income or your revenue.
Yeah. And this is how I know we were kept from the same class, because I was just about to head that way. Was that, yeah, you're going to have up months and down months and up months and down months. That's just the way it is. Like that's showbiz, baby. But when you do scale, like that's the nerve-wracking thing is like, for me, it was like, I have my team on pretty almost set payroll. They kind of know what to budget and expect. The hardest part about being an entrepreneur is a lot of times if you have a rougher, month, a lot of times it doesn't really come out unless your team did something crazy a lot of times that comes out of your paycheck in a way. At least that's kind of how it's been with us. It's like, I'm like, oh, we did have a lower month. I need to make sure my team's taken care of because that'll kill morale if I don't. So it does kind of,
that's a great point. That is the payoff, or excuse me, the trade-off when you own the business is yes, you get all the rewards. That's why the owners make the most money typically in a successful business. However, you take on the risk when things are a little bit tight. Like you said, you don't want to tell everyone working for you, oh, I'm not going to be able to pay as much, especially if it's on a retainer or any type of salary type of situation. But yeah, if you have low months, it's generally going to eat into the profit of the business or the profit that you take out of it. If that's the case, this is where it's so important, if you can, to try to have as much money just in the 3 to 6 month range. That way, if Nick doesn't take a paycheck this month, not the end of the world. We'll make up for it next month when all these projects come in and you can do a little marketing and whatever it is. Easier said than done, I know. And it's more of a mentality thing because it's like, last month we were killing it. This month is terrible. I'm going to end up on the streets. But it's not going to happen. That is how it happens in business, is you have good months and bad months. And I've definitely learned, we've talked about this before, a lot of the people in the Web Design Club, we've all kind of had to rally around each other and say, get used to like evaluating things quarterly, because that'll generally give you a good feel for like a 3-month period. You are going to have a bad month. You are going to have a good month. They generally level out. Now, if you go like 6 months and things are just really, really on the downward spiral, then it's time to pivot and make some changes or up your rates or whatever it is. But yeah, I feel like generally people either look at their business from a year standpoint or like a weekly standpoint, which is equally as dangerous. So you got to evaluate things knowing there's going to be those highs and lows. When did you get to that like $10,000 a month average? I realize some months are probably lower, some months are higher, but how long did it take you officially to get to that average? Because $8,000 a month on average is 6 figures.
Yeah. Yep. So we got there. I hate to say it was kind of quick, like month 7 or 8 was when we started. Cause about month 7 or 8, we were really hitting stride last August. In around August, September is when we really hit stride, and we've been kind of going like this. In fact, something amazing, like super stoked, was last month was our best month yet.
Oh, awesome. Congrats, man.
Thanks. It's a cool feeling. It's a cool feeling when you like look and you do, have highs and lows. You look in your bank account and you're like, okay, like, or not starving this month. That's good. But yeah, it is. I'd say about month 7 or 8 for me. But dude, like I said, I networked like crazy. I was like, I'm going to meet as many people as possible, within staying my limits of not like losing my mind as well.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning. I mean, you were still doing the design, right? Like you were, I mean, you scaled pretty quickly, but it sounds like you were still doing most of it in the very first few months.
Yeah. Yep. So that was it. That's actually, here's the funny part was, for Q4 last year was when we were smoking. We were humming, baby. We were out that door, baby. And then January, February was not smoking. Like it kind of sucked. Like it was bad. And then, like I said, for May was the best month. Now June has been was the best month. So like you said, you ride the waves. I think as long as you're trending upwards, don't get hung up on the wave riding.
Yes. Who was I talking to about this? In Buzzsprout, which is where I post my podcast and they get kicked out to all the directories. You can look at the downloads by month, or like you can actually see like up, down, up, down, up, down. You can look by month, by week, or cumulative, which is just the overall amount of downloads. And as long as the cumulative line looks good and is going up and to the right within reason, that's what you want to go for. So you don't want to be that business owner that one week is like, oh my gosh, we're rolling. And then the next week they're like, oh, we're going out of business, fire everybody. Like you cannot be that business owner. And it's really easy to fall into that trap where like you look at things week to week. So that's really cool to hear that you were able to kind of look past that, because I actually feel like most people I've talked to, not only just web design service providers, but course creators, online marketers, I think most everybody had a slow start to 2022. I did.
Oh, really?
January and February were my two lowest months ever in my business. November, December, wild. I was like, holy cow, this is like a whole wow. We're like in a new level. And then of course, naturally the backspin of that is like January and February. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Yeah. What have I done? What did I do something different? Did Google change something? Did I get blacklisted somewhere? Like what happened? But then I bounced back in this year and March and April, and it's been going steady even despite, taking a really light summer personally. So it is common, man. I definitely don't think you're alone. I think a lot of people listening are probably nodding their heads like, I had a freaking slow start to 2022 as well. But we know some people in the club who have had similar to you, like the most wild last couple months leading up to mid 2022. And that can make up for those low months. So.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head right there. Is you wouldn't know. It was actually really nice to hear that year 2022, we all were in the same boat. You wouldn't know that if you weren't talking to other people. If you're not talking about other people that are talking to other people, you would think that you've got a broken product and you're doomed and like this is all over. But if you have, and that's why I strongly suggest, like we said earlier, was community, because if you don't have that community, it's being an entrepreneur is a lonely, lonely place. I love my wife. I know her like almost the back of my hand, likewise with her, with me, but it's just hard. She will never be able to understand where I'm at, in this biz, and that's okay. It's not her fault. But like, if you have people who are in the cut with you, like it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause there's a time, like, it sounds like your wife, so Mrs. Monahan, had some gold advice for you. And sometimes it is great to have somebody who's outside of it to give you some advice that translates. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. That's a totally good point. I need to hear that. But then there are like those practical, tactical, like things and maybe tools that you use that like nobody else is going to understand. You need to talk with somebody who knows the actual challenges you're going through. So you're you're doing all the right things, Nick. It's so cool to see the trajectory you've been on and what you've done so far. I mean, you should be super proud of what you've done so far. I mean, you've worked your ass off. You've never stopped smiling though. I still can't imagine Nick in a down day. That would freak me out if you were like, I'm not doing well. I'd be like, I can't handle this. So hopefully you keep smiling.
Well, I appreciate that. I think my wife's seen a handful, but other than that, not too bad.
Right. Yeah. Well, Nick, man, this has been so cool, dude. I really appreciate you taking some time to kind of let us in on what you've done with your agency. I mean, I'm writing a book right now, and it's basically like I might just take the transcript of this episode and use that as the outline, because it's really about starting a web design business, and it's just a mess. But then you get to the point where it's there. You're committed, which is a biggie. You go for it. You burn the ships. This is it. And you get out of your comfort zone. I'm just kind of recapping what we've talked about, your journey so far. You find out what you're good at. You go for it. You start raising your rates. You get through that inevitable dip that always comes. Sometimes it's 2 months in. Sometimes it's a year in. It may look different, but you get past that, get out of your comfort zone. You figure out what you're good at. You hone in on that. You refine your services. You raise your rates, and then you start to scale at the level that you're comfortable with, and you can continue to do that. You're going to get through some messes. Your subcontractors are going to mess up. That's all right. You got to get used to it. And then you get to the point where you start having some stable months and you get to that 6-figure range. now you can really scale because you get to that 6-figure range. Because you could look at it cumulatively, like, okay, now, like, yeah, this month we made 4,000, but last month we made 12,000. So what's the middle of that? 8,000. You're still in the 6-figure range if you look at that. So as long as you keep that momentum going, that is it. And then personally, you got married, you got a little baby now who's adorable, and that changes everything with your mindset, because now suddenly it's not about you or even just you and your wife. It's you got a little mouth to feed, and here you are. You're at the point now where you've scaled successfully in my mind, even though you're early on. Kind of maybe my last question to put a cap on this, Nick, is what's next? Where do you see the next few months going for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny how you put a nice little bowl. That's literally been the journey. I would say what's next is we're bringing on another marketing assistant. My goal is to be completely hands off everything. Not everything, but move to a support role for my team as opposed to the clients, where my team, becomes an ecosystem where it really is functioning on its own. And then I'm there to come up with, systems, processes, troubleshoot with them. And so that's a big part. And then the other thing is starting up. I had a podcast a while back, but starting that back up. The Monahan Show is what we'll call it. So that'll be a ton of fun. So really excited about that. And then
what would the podcast, what's the audience for the podcast? Is that small business owners or anything like that?
Yeah. Marketing, just building a marketing business. So that's kind of, where we're going to try and, hit home. The big thing is telling my story and telling other people that they're not alone. And, as we continue to grow and as we continue to learn, passing along information, things like that. So really just, I have the gift of gab. I'm on another podcast for men's mental health called the Rubio Method. So those are just kind of my, that's the next path. And then let's see. Yeah, I think those are the big steps, is just getting out of my business more and more so, and then doing the podcast thing, because I'm really excited about that. And
so you're scaling with an intention of opening room and time up for other things to be able to implement in there. That's cool. That's kind of when I was essentially forced to scale initially because I had so many projects I had to scale. And then it became a point where once I did get addicted to delegating, it was okay, now I have room to teach. I actually have time to invest in teaching and eventually launch a podcast. So I think it's really common. It's a great point that when somebody does start to scale, just heads up, you'll likely get to that point where suddenly you're going to have other reasons why you're going to want to scale. It's not just about money. It's not just about running the business. In some cases, that might be it. Then more power to you. But sometimes it's well, I've had this passion project sitting on the side. I've just never had time for it. Well, now's the time, because you can scale. So that's really cool. I'm actually kind of curious. Do you have a couple more minutes, Nick, just to wrap this up?
Yeah.
What is your, do you envision how big you want to grow this agency, or are you just kind of letting it evolve naturally?
Yeah. So eventually the 3-year plan is to be $1 million agency. That's
nice.
A lofty goal, but it's one I want to achieve. I think that we can do it. We just got to forge forward and continue to put the processes that we're putting in place in there. So that's the 3-year plan. And the 5-year plan is, possibly sell, or just be a high-level CEO, that kind of the business really runs itself. I have a buddy, the same guy that tossed me that awesome lead. He's kind of in that boat where he might be looking to sell, but he also dude, he takes so much time with his family, and that's what I want to do. I want to be able to relax and kind of enjoy how difficult this season was of growth and pushing through and building something that has my name on it too, which is really cool. So that's kind of where I want to go.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, I think so. $1 million, so a 7-figure business by 2025? Is that about right? Yeah. So I think you could totally do that, man. There's no doubt you could. I mean, I think absolutely, particularly based off of your track record these past couple of years, because the reality is, I just was doing the math. If anyone's watching, I wasn't ignoring Nick. $1 million business is about $83,000 per month, which that's lofty. That sounds like a lot, but if you get to the point where you get to 20 a month on average, you're at $250,000 business. So generally, I found, most people I know, once you get to $250,000, you can generally put the systems and people in place to scale up, and then you can 2x, 3x, and 4x. I mean, you relatively quickly with how your systems are and how many clients you could take. You could definitely get to that point as you raise your rates, as you train the team, and as they have more stock in the business, and you'll probably get to a point where they are maybe it is a payroll kind of situation, and it's much more, you're the CEO, the founder, the leader, but other people are actually handling the day-to-day and stuff. I think you can totally do that, man. And it's weird because $80,000 a month sounds crazy, but once you do get to the point where, like, even once you get to $10,000 a month on average, it's like, okay, that looks a little more achievable. And I don't want anyone to feel like, oh my gosh, this is like way over my head, because I'm not at that point yet, but it definitely makes you realize, like, wow, once you get 2,000 a month on average, you can get to 5. Get to 5,000 a month on average, you can get to 10. Once you get 10,000 a month on average, you can totally get to 20, 30, 40, 50. And then the next step, once you get to the 50 range, is the 7 figures. So the $1 million business. So that's awesome, man. I don't know. I wanted to share that because hopefully you said it was a lofty goal, but I don't know if you've looked at it like that. Like, it is lofty, but you're on your way. Like, if you look at the stats, it looks like that's what you're going to hit.
Someone say I'm avalanching there.
There you go. You're rolling down the hill, and you're sliding right into 7 figures. So
that's right. But I'm so glad you said that really quick too, because, you know, if me saying that, like when I first started, I want to make $1 million business. Holy cats, like that's scary. But if you break it down, like my buddy said, you know how you eat an entire elephant, which sounds nasty, but it's one bite at a time. You finish it at one bite at a time, and same thing. So if you guys are just starting off, or you're in any part of your journey, one bite at a time, one day at a time, keep putting those things on there and it'll happen. Yeah.
Nick, awesome, dude. This was so cool. I'm excited to chat for the next one, where I imagine you'll probably be like $500,000, and then we'll really get to hear some fun insight about what you've implemented and what's working. So, man, thank you so much for your time, for opening up and just being an open book about what you've learned and what's working well, lessons learned the hard way. I've really enjoyed this, man. I mean, it's been an honor for you to go through my courses and to be able to coach you in my web design club, and that's why I love having that, because I would have never known what you've done unless I had a chance to chat with you and to hear those updates. So, man, what an honor. I'm so glad you've taken the bull by the horns, as it will, and you've gone down this hill. Trying to keep the avalanche funds going, but you're there, man. Way to go, dude.
Thanks, man. Well, you know, I seriously, and my most heartfelt, could not have done it without you. And I'm forever grateful and thankful for you. And just also know too, what you're doing is changing generations and changing lives. So keep doing it, my brother.
Oh, thank you, Nick. And that's a great time to say, if anyone wants to share any wins with me, hit me up. Go to the post for this episode. We'll have the link in the description. I would love to hear how the resources have helped you out and how this interview has helped you out. So, Nick, thanks again, man. Looking forward to talking soon.
You bet, my brother. We'll see ya.
Hey friends, it's Josh here. I just wanted to mention a couple quick things before you head out. First off, if you've been enjoying the show, please consider leaving a podcast review. I personally read all the podcast reviews. I love hearing your thoughts and feedback on the show, and it also really helps grow this podcast. You can do that easily if you go to joshhall.co/podcast review, and you can leave a review wherever you listen to the show. And then I also wanted to make sure you know that for all the extras on every one of these podcast episodes, you can go to joshhall.co/podcast. We have a post there for every episode, which includes full transcriptions, timestamps, and all the links and resources that we mentioned. So just go to joshhall.co/podcast for all the extra goodies. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next.